Welcome to another Founder Wisdom Pod. We have Chris Grundemann with us today. Chris is a network infrastructure advisor, a strategy consultant at CADCA Consulting. He's the co-founder of Network Automation Forum. And yeah, he's been co-founder for quite some time now at IX Denver, an advisor at a couple of companies. We're going to talk about his background and what he's up to today. BookRideGPT.com is presenting this podcast. If you want to take your LinkedIn post and convert them into a Kindle book in less than 5 minutes, you can go to BookRideGPT.com. The first book credit is on me. Chris, welcome to the pod. Tell me a bit
Yeah,
more about yourself and what you're up to nowadays.
thanks for having me here. Yeah, I guess I'm a network engineer by trade. I started out building networks, mostly service provider networks, back at the turn of the century, and since then have kind of evolved into more of an entrepreneur. And right now, I'm really focusing on the consulting side of things and helping people, as you said, with network infrastructure.
Interesting. So, how does someone turn into like a network administrator into an entrepreneur? Like, was that shift brutal for you, or was it second nature?
A little bit of both, I guess. Like a lot of things, it's complex, but I've always been interested in entrepreneurship and in business. Maybe not always, definitely from very early on. One of my first kind of real jobs in network engineering was working for a small service provider in Colorado. And the guys who owned it were all kind of, it was their kind of second wave. It was kind of like they had retired from corporate jobs and had some money and started this little internet service provider. And just seeing behind the scenes of how a small company worked and how you could just kind of create a company and create a service and create something from nothing was really fascinating. And then it took me a long time to kind of get back to that. I basically stuck on the kind of career path of just being a better and better engineer and architect, learning a lot of things along the way. And I think I did kind of steer my career in ways where I got to learn the things that I felt like I needed to learn to feel confident enough to go out on my own, which I've been now for about 5 years.
Right. And you have a couple of companies now. Like, what does a day to day in your life look like?
Yeah, so I bounce around a little bit. There's a few things I do. So IX Denver is an internet exchange. It's a nonprofit, and that is something that I founded about 10 years ago. Actually, this year is 10 years now. So I do check in there and kind of keep on tabs there, make sure that the team's doing well. Mostly for them right now, I do a lot of the kind of negotiation around contracts and things like that for turning up new data centers, and so that's a lot of just that kind of thing, negotiation and finding new partners and things like that. I also more recently founded a company, co-founded with a partner of mine, Scott Roban, a company called Network Automation Forum. And that's another one that's more of a community project where we put on a conference specific to network automation focused on practitioners. So folks who are actually out in the field doing this work, we bring them together twice a year now. We're going into our fourth event, which is going to be in Prague actually in 2 weeks. And that takes a decent amount of time. A lot of what I do there is kind of community stewardship, work with the community, pull insights out of the community and document those so people can kind of come back to it later. I also work on a lot of the talk selection and working with speakers to make sure that they give a great presentation at the conference. And then, like I said, right now, my main focus is on a new venture that I just launched this month called Kaja Consulting, which is really focused on consulting advisory services at the intersection of technology and organizational culture for network infrastructure specifically. So it's a pretty small niche. And the goal there is to really be the go-to person for that particular thing, which is essentially management consulting for network infrastructure projects. So again, really, really focused.
Right. And who's your ICP for that one? Like precisely, you mentioned network infrastructure, but you work with specific industries, specific company size. What roles do you target? And yeah, how do you get to market with that one?
Yeah. So all of that is kind of starting and evolving right now. It's mainly, I think, CIOs and then maybe technology executives, maybe right below the CIOs at kind of mid-market, like small to medium enterprise. So I'm looking at companies that are making over $500 million a year in revenue, but are probably less than 10,000 employees is kind of the sweet spot for me. and then, like I said, working with the executive leadership that's focused on technology and network operations.
Right. And when you say network operations, are you referring to hardware? Are you referring to cloud software specifically? Because I feel a bunch of people use fancy words to describe stuff that is most of the time simple, you know?
Right.
So like what is it that you do in a couple of words?
Yeah. So yes, exactly. Routers and switches. It's the hardware and the software that runs on them, but then now more and more the software that helps run those devices. And so you're building up from, the physical device, because networking, well, I mean, the dirty secret of all software is that it runs on hardware, right? But in networking specifically, you need specialized hardware to be able to move packets, to move bits, right? To move that bandwidth across the network. And then there's an operating system that's firmware that runs on that device. And then now more and more, we're building more complex management systems to be able to automate the operations of the entire network as a system, which is fairly new. It's been going on in bits and pieces for years and years now, but really is coming into its own as a full-on practice of really building a platform for management of your entire network, regardless of the vendor of the specific devices. So it's a little bit of both hardware and software. It also does bleed into cloud, because all cloud applications, there is a network below that as well. But in most cases there, you're kind of outsourcing that bit, right? You don't do much with the network infrastructure itself in the cloud. You do need to still handle the routing and moving packets around, but a lot of it's abstracted away from you.
And is it in internal operations? Is it on your client's client side, on the application side, or do you also just deal with legacy companies? For example, I don't know if Walmart's a good example because they do have an e-commerce, but do you deal with companies that actually have applications deployed, or just any companies that has a tech infrastructure in the background running?
Yeah, definitely both. I mean, as you mentioned, right, that line is blurring quite a bit. So many companies now rely on some form of digital infrastructure,
Yeah.
whether they have just, a portal for customers to get into, or they've got chatbots to help customers, digital ordering and fulfillment processes, or behind the scenes, maybe they're running factories or plants on some kind of software that maybe they built in-house or maybe they bought. So that line is definitely really blurry. But this is mostly for, the networks that are underlying whatever it is that business does. And so it's everything from the network that carries, the people's email around to each other, but also the network that allows them to, manage their CRM and reach out to their customers. And especially now where we've seen, the fancy word is deperimeterization, but basically the network has kind of escaped the office in a lot of ways. So if you go back maybe 20, 30 years, people had, some switches and some servers and some desks and some computers in an office. And at the end of the day, they could, lock the door and unplug the internet, and you were good to go. Now that digital infrastructure has escaped the office, and you've got people working from home, maybe they're working from vacation all the way around the world, plus your applications, whether you're building them yourselves or you're consuming them from a provider, they're out in the cloud somewhere. And so much of an enterprise's network is now not directly under their control. And so understanding how to deal with those realities is part of it as well.
And why wouldn't they just depend on vendors and have their own internal servers? Like, isn't that like way less of a pain? I understand some of them need to be compliant and so forth, but most of these vendors are compliant already, and their customers' data is sort of safe. Why would they need to manage all of that stuff internally?
Yeah. Well, there's a couple reasons. So on the one most basic level is, if you still have people coming to an office and working, there has to be a network in that office. And for most companies of any size, that's an office that they're going to manage the network for. So at the very base level, you've got this campus network to allow people who are in the office to be able to connect to their resources. That's probably not going away for most, although there are folks that are now coming in with network as a service offerings. There's a few companies that will actually come in, replace your hardware, and run the whole network as a service. So almost like a cloud network inside of your own office, which is pretty wild. And for some folks, that's the right option. If the network is just a utility and it doesn't really impact your business whatsoever, let the specialists work managing it, right? But there are still a lot of businesses where the network is a strategic asset, where being able to spin up and spin down networks, be able to add new departments, add new people, especially like you said, if people are doing specialized software development, they're running their own data centers. There are reasons for people to have their own network infrastructure still. And in those cases, those are the folks that I'm helping to manage it, just like the clouds do already.
Right. You run a podcast as well. Why did you decided to start that?
Yeah, so I did a podcast for a couple of years now. Partner Zoe Rose, she and I ran the Imposter Syndrome Network podcast for a couple of years. We did 100 episodes, and the idea there was, for a long time as a network engineer and even as an entrepreneur, I kind of worked by myself, and a lot of the things I was going through, a lot of the feelings of insecurity, feeling that I wasn't quite good enough, feeling that like why am I doing this? Who am I to be doing this thing, right? A lot of those feelings crept up. And a few years ago, I started contributing and collaborating with a group of folks called Tech Field Day. And they're a bunch of folks who are industry analysts and influencers in the technology space. And when I met these folks and started talking to them, I realized that they had the exact same feelings. That they woke up some days and were like, man, I don't know what I'm doing here. I'm not qualified to do this. Even though they are the experts in the field, they still feel that way. And sometimes being more of an expert makes you feel more insecure about your place as an expert, right? It's the kind of the Dunning-Kruger effect of, the more you know, the less you know. And so then you become more insecure in your knowledge. And so just addressing that idea that, hey, there's a lot of us who work in technology, and it happens in other industries too, but obviously my space is technology. People who work in technology who, are experts, but don't necessarily feel like it. And so we wanted to talk openly about that with a bunch of people. And so we had a great list of guests, some really, really prominent players, and some folks who are kind of just in the trenches working every day, and just talked about some of these issues of, have you ever made a mistake? How did that feel? How did you recover from it? These kind of things.
Have you ever made a mistake? That's a very silly question. Anyway,
It is.
I never had imposter syndrome myself. Maybe that's because I'm like more on the megalomania side of things, but I'm also open-minded, right? I think like a bunch of very odd traits can coexist in one person.
Sure.
I also have seen that in like one of the best entrepreneurs that I interviewed, they rarely have that imposter syndrome there. And I think it's rational that you need to be naive and yes, sort of delusional to be really successful in business, but also you get to understand that, yeah, most of this life and this business field is a construct. And if you're just constantly nagging yourself with these negative feelings and that internal bullshit, you just slow yourself down. I don't think it's faking confidence. I think it's mostly, I would explain it from a molecular standpoint, like testosterone, I would say, and having less like cortisol in my blood and more endorphins, dopamine, serotonin. I do take care of myself. I do think that's one of the reasons why I don't constantly put myself down, but I never really had that imposter syndrome. And obviously some days I'm like, yo, this guy's is infinitely better than myself.
Sure.
But that motivates me to go catch him,
Right.
Like someone chasing a prey. So why would you think that is?
Yeah, well, there are a couple of things. I think a number of things factor into this, right? And so in general, women and underrepresented minorities feel this imposter syndrome more than straight white men. Because of just the culture we've been raised in, right? Like I think, I don't know too much about you, but I assume we were raised very similarly, which is my parents told me I could do anything I wanted, and I looked around at the world and I believed it because everyone who was doing something important looked a lot like me. And when that's not true, you may have more feelings of doubt creep in. And then where this gets interesting to me is specifically in the technology space, there's a lot of neurodivergent folks, right? So there's people who look like me and you, but maybe they have Asperger's or autism, or just really severe ADHD.
Neurodivergent. I'm very neurodivergent. I don't like the word also because there's like a woke connotation to it. And my ADHD and all of that is a superpower because I can master it. But yeah, go on. It's interesting.
Well, and not everyone's mastered it, right? And so in a lot of cases, there's a lot of folks who instead of mastering it, they mask it. They try to hide it. And then that leads to these
because of the corporate world. I'm pointing
exactly
the finger at the corporate world there.
Exactly right.
Because I never had that. I never worked corporate on my side. I think that's a huge factor.
And so if you've got to try to fit in with this group and there's these pressures to fit into that group, and now you're masking, then all of a sudden you start having these feelings of, wait a minute, like, why don't I fit in? Why am I the weirdo? Or like, and that unravels. And so that's a lot about what we
Yeah.
talked about on that podcast, was exactly these kind of things. And I think there are multiple sides to it for sure.
I also think I have a chip on my shoulder, right? That I sort of invented because, like you said, I had a nice childhood. Yeah, I think I was raised mostly as a libertarian, could go
Mhm.
with my little bike everywhere that I
Yep.
wanted with my group of friends. I'd fall flat on my face, I'd get up again. But I also think that, yeah, having some kind of chip on your shoulder is great. And as you probably know, like being an entrepreneur is a very lonely and
Mhm.
very long fucking road, like
Yeah.
I've been 10 years in that game and only starting to see like the quote unquote success that I deserve, right? So yeah, it's a very long road and that can like mess with your mind a lot. I don't think most people are built right now for entrepreneurship, but I think
Mhm.
they should jump into it, and because there's no other options with AI coming for most people's job. What do you think about that thesis?
Yeah, so I have thought for a long time that the more people we can encourage to find out how they can be entrepreneurs, right? And I think there's different ways, there's different paths. There's lots of people who do things in very different ways and approach things from every different perspectives. And I agree that not everyone is cut out for it, but I also think that there's different ways to do it, and that I mean, that's part of entrepreneurship, right? Is figuring out a new business model, figuring out a new way to do things. And so as we get more and more people to be doing that, I think it empowers everyone. I think it's much better to be working for yourself than working for someone else, if you can pull it off. Right now, as you said, though, there is a downside to that, right? Almost every overnight success actually grinded away for 5, 10, 15 years before that success happened. It looks overnight, but there's a lot of work. There's a lot of sleepless nights. There's a lot of stress. And we talking about that cortisol. A lot of this stuff can build up on you. And so you've got to find your way to, like, stay healthy mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally. Which, again, though, if you go back to it, shouldn't everyone be doing that anyway? And if you learn how to do that, if you learn how to master yourself and you learn how to control your emotions, not control your response to your emotions, and stay healthy and stay fit and all these things, then you probably are a candidate for entrepreneurship, I think. And like I said, like, we should all probably be doing that anyway.
Yeah, I think it's time for humanity to evolve, right? Because we forged clans, villages, eventually metropolises. Then we had a government over us so that we wouldn't like murder one another.
Mhm.
Then corporations became a thing in the industrial age. And I think these corporations has very much blurred the picture. Education is also related to corporations because it's like a funnel for
Mhm.
corporations to hire a bunch of yes men's and good boy type of people. And I
Sure.
think that really needs to change. I don't think the educational system is scaling in the age of AI. I think most students should be obsessed with ChatGPT, and actually they are. Like what I'm seeing, a bunch of young folks, they're instead of using Google Chrome, they use ChatGPT as an application. They manage pretty much everything there, which is
Mm.
smart because they can give all their data, and ChatGPT can learn about it. I think Sam Altman can be trusted with data, but I also think there's going to be other players in that. I also think there's going to be apps to recuperate all that data that you fed to ChatGPT, and it makes life pretty much infinitely better. So I do see this as an advantage of new generations entering the market, while boomers are just busy like funding big bad corporations, most of
Mm.
them creating bureaucracy and gerontocracy, sort of. So, and I think they can pretty much be easily replaced by these new generations, right? But some schools are banning ChatGPT, right? So
Mhm.
that's pretty bad. So what do you think would give them new generations a fair shot at this market?
Yeah, so there's a lot to unpack there. I think one of the interesting things is there's definitely been. I think there was some research study or journalist report that came out. I haven't read the source material, but I've been seeing people sharing this thing about ChatGPT and cheating in school. And the thing is, cheating was going on way before AI.
Yeah,
Um,
and everyone cheats in business. By the way, we look at the 5% rules and we try to break them, the best of us. That's what we do.
yeah, you
It's
look at
not
some of the most
necessarily
recent.
bad, by the way. If it stays ethical, if you're not hurting others, a lot of rules are pretty goddamn stupid and should be
Mhm.
broken.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you look at some of the biggest successes lately, right? You look at Uber, right? Uber was illegal in every city they
Oh
operated
yeah,
in for the first few
Airbnb
years.
as well.
Airbnb as well. So yeah, I mean, there's definitely needs to be some rule breaking there. And I tend to believe that my rights extend into the point where someone else's rights begin.
Yeah, same here.
And so as long as I'm like you said, right, as long as you're not hurting someone, kind of do what you want is my general opinion there. You have to be careful though, because those interactions between where the rights touch each other get pretty complicated pretty quickly. But in
And
general,
some
I agree with
people
that.
extend their rights infinitely long. These
True.
people think they have all kinds of fucking rights.
And they can tell you
Just
what to
come.
do. Yeah.
Yeah, so that also needs to be taken care of. But I think that's a minority of people. Most humans are good people.
I think so. Yeah, I mean, I think that's something I thought about a lot when I was a kid. Right? You see these stories of like whether it's James Bond or the cartoons, and there's always like a good guy and a bad guy. And I remember asking myself like, why would anyone want to be the bad guy? And it really confused me for a long time. And then I grew up and I realized no one thinks they're the bad guy.
Right, but also
They
the
think
good
they're doing the
guys,
right
if
thing.
the good guys stay long enough, they'll turn into a Death Star and a black hole. I do think so. Generally
Well, yeah, there
speaking,
is
that's
that
very
idea that
philosophical.
power corrupts, right? I mean, and that or that power attracts people who are
Yeah,
corruptible.
take Elon for example. Elon's a good example of that, right? Like sort of turned into the dark force as of late. I'm pretty sure he's gonna pivot back into the good old Elon that created Tesla, that made the world a better place, and that started the electrical revolution and so forth. I just want to ask you a couple more
Yeah,
questions because we only have 3 minutes. I saw that you
sure.
did your first ultra not
Yeah,
so long ago.
yeah, yeah.
I do a bunch of these. How was it for you?
It was great. I really turned around when I started running. I hated it. And now I just did that. Yeah, that 50K, which is a little bit over 30 miles. It was great. And the cool thing about the ultras is you get to go out and run in nature, and you do these long runs that would basically be impossible if you were alone. But because there's aid stations, because there's support, you can go out and just run through the forest or run through the mountains or run through the desert for hours and hours and hours and hours, which I think there's not much better than that for me anyway.
Yeah, yeah. You can reproduce these in any city, just that you need to have cash on you, right? And you
Yeah,
stop at
sure.
convenience stores and you
That's a good
take
point.
water.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
hadn't thought
I
about
do
that.
those. There's a guy who
Do an
was on
urban
my
ultra.
pod last week. He did like 600 miles. He did the Moab and all
Wow.
these crazy shits, and we're gonna do a 75K here in Oaxaca, where I am right now, and yeah, we're just gonna stop at convenience store with cash, and no, these races, they're beautiful, right? Like any time you can spend in nature, it's like pure
Mhm.
recovery almost.
I agree. And going back to kind of the chemical composition of your body you were talking about, right? I'm a really big fan of flow state and trying to find flow state. And I think that long distance running is one place where I just lock in and it's fucking beautiful.
Interesting. Yeah, I think a lot of times I'm in the pain cave, right? Like my last
Mhm.
100K in Puerto Vallarta, it's like pure uphill. It's tough to find low state, but yeah, let's call it like I don't know, kilometer 21 to 50 most
Definitely
probably.
not the whole time. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
And
because
so far I've
after
only
that,
done
dude,
50K.
it's a
So
pretty big pain cave.
the next 50K after the first 50K, I'm excited to try out. But I haven't experienced that yet.
Because 50K is like the perfect distance. Like I do these Spartan ultras, and yeah,
Mhm.
let's do one together if you want to come down in
Heck
Mexico.
yeah,
If I
that'd be
do
awesome.
some
I spent a lot of time in Mexico.
Oh yeah, cool. Well,
Yeah.
there's one in Ciudad de Mexico, Mexico City, in
Mhm.
3 months from now. We could do that one together, and these are so fun because you get to do like CrossFit sort of, like rope climbing, monkey bars and all
Yeah,
of
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Plus, you run,
Right.
and
That
it's
sounds
it's
fun.
kind of hard. It's not easy, but it's
Sure.
not super hard as well. So yeah, these have been great. Have you thought about doing some Spartans someday?
Definitely, yeah. I've been thinking about it for sure. Yeah, yeah. And I remember even back. I mean, I never did one, but like when Tough Mudder first came out, and some of the first ones in that realm, it seems really cool. It's like a playground for big dudes.
Yeah, I often say that. I think Joe Senna is a genius, like the guy that designed these races
Yeah,
because he thinks about every details. He brings pain, yes, but to some limit, right? It's very strategic how they design these courses. Another one that I'd like to invite you to later on this year, we're doing Ultra Parati in Brazil, 110K with like 3 to 4 other CEOs and founders. So if
Okay.
you want to join us on that one, but yeah, that one is we're gonna hit Pain K for sure.
Okay, cool. Yeah, sounds interesting.
All right, Chris, where can people find out more about you?
Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn. Also, right now, the new venture, Kaja Consulting, is just kaja.consulting. It might be tough to spell, but I'm sure it'll be in the show notes or something. And then also chrisgrundemann.com is kind of my home for all the things. There's links to everything else from there.
Perfect. So that was Chris.